Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and most welcome to the Pentalateral Forum webinar on the future of electricity heavy-duty vehicles and how to integrate electromobility in the energy transition. Thanks for joining us for the next 3 hours. My name is Guy Lenz. I am from the Ministry of Energy of Luxembourg. I'm based here in Brussels. And it's my pleasure to be your guide and walk you through today's session for what technicalities matter. Claude Thomas, Minister of Energy of Luxembourg, will be the master of the substance and the moderator of the whole webinar. Before introducing the ones who are behind the curtain and put so much effort those last months and weeks in the difficult conditions that we all experience to put this webinar in place, let me briefly explain you what is Pentalateral Forum. It was created 15 years ago between the Benelux countries, Germany, France, Austria, and Switzerland as observer. It represents 150 million citizens and would rank number 3 after China and the US in the G7. The main goal for this regional cooperation is making electricity market more open, more liquid, more sustainable, more competitive, and also more secure and more affordable for all citizens of the region. Now, let me briefly introduce our partners by order of the invitation, the organizers of this webinar. First of all, IRENA. IRENA is, as probably all of you know, the International Organization of Renewable Energy. It is now a universal organization with 161 members and 20 countries in the process of accession, and is the reference in renewable energy development worldwide. Then the Benelux Secretariat. In 1944 already, Belgium, the Netherlands and Luxembourg decided of a custom union. In 2008, a new treaty was signed to create the Benelux Secretariat. The Secretariat is the administrative support of this union and also for the last 15 years now, the host of the Pentalateral Forum. Then Transport and Environment, TNE, is for 30 years now the leading NGO in the EU working on sustainability transport in Europe. TNE is for 30 years now working on that, and TNE is based in Brussels and mostly dealing with the European markets. ChargePoint now. ChargePoint mission is a U-mobility charging solution provider based in Amsterdam in activity in Europe as well as in the United States, covering hardware and software solutions. And finally, the Ministry of Energy of Luxembourg. In a moment, I will give you an overview of the session, but first, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Claude Thomas, Minister of Energy and Spatial Planning, to give his welcoming remarks. Claude, over to you.
Thank you, Guy. Great to see Sandro with us. I think Netherlands is leading in a lot of ways the sustainability and the energy transition in Europe, and also Dolph. So it's a real pleasure also to open this conference. By the way, we are more than 500 today, so I hope that we will be up to your enthusiasm and expectations. So electromobility moves fast, and one area which is not a lot discussed is really trucks. And but personally, I think that trucks could move very quickly, also because it's not an emotional business. It's a business where every cent, euro cent or dollar cent counts. So which means that once you have a break even, things would go very fast. 1 year ago, exactly on the 22nd of October, we organized already as Luxembourgish Ministry of Energy, e-mobility conference in the Pentalateral framework that was on electric cars, and helped us to also better understand how do we promote cars, and that was very helpful also for me to now speed up the road of electric cars in Luxembourg. So trucks is of course an even bigger story. So without moving trucks to zero emission, there's absolutely no hope to win the race against climate change. But innovation, I think, will help us a lot. So this webinar is, I think, special because it's a pentalateral webinar. Guy already pointed out, probably the third biggest country or region in economic terms, if it would be in G7. But this conference is also special because we really tried this time to bring also the energy, the electricity side to the table, because we think that the only way to speed up penetration of electric trucks is also to really think upfront on the electric infrastructure we need. And then, of course, this is not just a nice webinar, but it is the start of a structural work which we will have within the pentalateral setting. So we will have a standing working group which will help us between Germany, France, Benelux countries, Switzerland and Austria to speed up our working together in this important area. So thank you very much for joining us, Guy, and all those who have participated to organize. Thank you for that, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Claude, for this introduction. Before going to Sander and to Dolph, and then diving into the substance, let me walk briefly into a few housekeeping items which are important in these webinars, certainly when we are so much people attending. First of all of you are muted and will remain so through the whole event. There is a Q&A section after each session, and to make it more interactive, I invite you to post questions to our panelists in the chat box that you see on the right side, top on the right side, where you can write your questions. We will pick some of your questions that we will then give to the panelists. I cannot promise you that we can take all your questions, but we will try. I mean, the organization team, we will try to also answer you directly in the chat for some question that you would have and that we could not pick up for the panelists. And for that, you can use the slides button. The slides and the recordings will be shared via email after the end of the webinar. So you may also download the material for further readings in the handouts section. And after this webinar, we will encourage you to tell us if you liked it and how we can improve it for the next time. And for this purpose, please fill in the survey that will be sent to you after the webinar. It's always very useful for us. Now, coming to the agenda, if I can, thank you. So we will have 4 panel, and as Claude said, the minister said, it is a we have panels that are really balanced between, on one side, the technology, the transport, on the other side, finance, but also nexus between transport and how electric systems and how electricity will respond to this new challenge of heavy-duty vehicle. And the last panel will be dedicated to the role of the region cooperation. Our region, as Claude mentioned, it's quite a huge region and at the nexus of Europe in many terms, and certainly in terms of road and transport. So that would be very interesting to have your opinion and to reflect all together on this. And then we will have closing remarks from Mr. Jan Mollema and Claude, and also Dolph Gillen. So thank you for that. And now I immediately give the floor to my friend Sandor Gastra, Director General of Climate and Energy in the Ministry of Economic Affairs of the Netherlands, and actually the chair of the Pentalateral Forum. So Sandor, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Guy. Thank you, Claude. It's an honor to be here and to address you on behalf of the 2020 Dutch presidency of the Penta Forum. You both already stressed how important we can be as a pentalateral forum, and the economies we represent, and certainly e-mobility is at the forefront of our attention to make a more sustainable Europe. And as a pentalateral energy forum, we are indeed in a unique position to enhance the cooperation between all relevant parties, such as the TSOs, authorities, market parties, and ministries, in order to create a regional electricity market as an intermediate step towards one common European electricity market. And as one of the key economic sectors, the energy sector plays a crucial role in achieving the goal of net zero emissions by 2050. But it is more than clear that transport is equally important. And I'm therefore happy to address you and all the participants and support Luxembourg in this initiative to have a high-level discussion on the role of electric trucks in decarbonizing the transport sector and the nexus between energy and road freight sectors. And as you know, this additional focus was also already outlined in our common Penta paper on NECPs. First, let me briefly touch upon the Green Deal. We in the Netherlands believe that the Green Deal, the Climate Target Plan, and subsequent EU climate law are very important milestones where there is more and more attention for transport. So it's not only the regional cooperation we need, but also the EU-wide cooperation we need, with regional cooperation as an important stepping stone for that. And as the European Commission itself put it, when they announced the new ambition to come to 55 CO2 reduction in 2030, large emissions reductions have come from closing coal power stations and cleaning up of energy-intensive industry, while it proved harder to reduce emissions from transport, amongst others. So action is really needed. And I believe that the Pentalateral Energy Forum is and will continue to be a driving force behind achieving these goals. With our support groups and with the execution of our new priorities outlined in our common agenda, we are able to contribute to the implementation of the Green Deal and to the implementation of possible future recovery plans as a consequence of COVID-19. And we showed this already, for instance, with our hydrogen agenda. We were very successful as Penta to be the front runners in the development of hydrogen strategy in Europe. And we can also do that in the field of transport. So that is my conviction. Now, shortly on the topic of the conference, as Guy and Claude already mentioned, the future of heavy-duty vehicles is crucial for making our way to a more sustainable Europe. And we have all the Penta countries have made clear in their chapter in the NSCP that they will increase the share of renewable energy in heavy-duty transport by promoting electromobility, including fuel cell options. And facilitating these services without regional restrictions is a central objective that I hope will contribute to these issues. And we have to identify the barriers for cross-border development of electromobility, but we are also we have to learn not only cross-border, but we also have to learn cross-sector, namely transport and energy combined together. Battery electric and fuel cell electric are two, I think, important pillars of electromobility. Today, the focus is, I think, a bit more on battery electric. And I wanted to propose that the next time we also focus on fuel cell in line with the joint Penta support for hydrogen. And in particular for heavy and long distance transport, hydrogen, we think, is expected to play a very important role. So I sincerely hope to conclude that we can come to general conclusions on this important topic. And I am convinced that Penta can play a leading role also in the field of transport, as we have shown earlier in the field of energy. So thank you for your initiative coming from Luxembourg and all the other initiatives and all the other parties that took this initiative. And I wish ourselves a very fruitful webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sander, and again, thanks to you and also to your team and all the Dutch people that help us to organize this this event. Now, let me introduce to you Dr. Dolf Gilland. Dolf, I think we know each other for something like 12 years in ARENA. Dolf is Director of Innovation and Technology Center at ARENA, but based in Bonn, not in Abu Dhabi. And I'll let you introduce your keynote presentation. I think you have slides to show us. Dolf, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Guy, and welcome to everyone, also on behalf of ARENA, and thanks to all our co-organizers in making this event happen. If I can have my next slide, the next one. I first wanted to give you a bit of a resume of what we discussed last year. I mean, Claude already addressed it a bit, that there is interesting developments in the transport sector, which has also important implications for the renewable sector and for the energy sector in general. First of all, this year, Europe has become the largest EV market in the world. That is quite remarkable. When we discussed that development last year, we saw that there's a lot of attention for the sales of electric vehicles. You see it also now in the post-corona stimulus packages. There is attention for the public charging points, but there was not so much attention on the integration of the energy sector with the transport sector. And the conclusion from last year's discussion was that that is a topic that deserves more attention. Now, of course, most attention is focused on electric cars, to some extent also electric buses. On the freight sector, there has been less attention so far. And if you go to the next slide, I mean, a couple of years ago, if you had asked me, will we go for electric trucks, I would have said, it's not possible. But something has changed over the last couple of years. And it's very much driven by the synergies between cars and trucks. So for a truck, you would need the same type of batteries as you need for a car. And what we've seen in recent years is a significant ramp up of car battery manufacturing, and also rapid improvement in the performance of these batteries. And I would say it's not yet a run race. We don't know yet whether it goes in the direction of hydrogen, perhaps even biomethane and electromobility for heavy duty freight. But this electric freight is certainly becoming an important option to think about. And to give you a few numbers, the European Automobile Manufacturers Association expects 200,000 battery electric trucks by 2030 and calls for 90,000 charging points. And 2030 is not that far away. So to give you four interesting developments around these battery electric trucks. So first of all, purely looking from an efficiency perspective, the electric option is superior to the hydrogen option because you don't have the losses in first producing hydrogen and then converting the hydrogen again into electricity. But of course, the big issue for the electric trucks is the drive range and the weight of the batteries. Now, if you look at the drive range of trucks in Europe, the majority of the freight journeys are below 500 kilometers. So that's a distance where we have some trucks available today that can master that. And there are announcements of trucks that can drive much longer distances, electric trucks. Next one, please. And then the issue of battery weight. So also there, the amount of energy that you can store per kilo of battery has gone up over time. We're now at about 200 watt-hours per kilogram for the best in-class battery packs. And if you do the maths of you save some weight on the engine, but of course you have a much heavier battery, then the net weight increase for a truck with 25-ton payloads or 40-ton truck would be around 3 tons. So if you compare that to the 25-ton storage, you see that we're now talking about 15% of the payload capacity. Still a little bit high, but we expect continuous improvements in the battery energy densities over the coming years. And again, that comes from the cars. There's a big driver independent of the freight sector that will result in continuous improvements that will also benefit the trucks. And the final aspect is the weight, the cost of these batteries. So there we have seen a dramatic decrease by a factor of 8 between 2010 and 2019, and that will continue in the coming years. Again, driven by economies of scale, so massive ramp up of battery manufacturing capacity and technology improvements. Next one, please. Now, there have been quite a lot of studies about what do we now need in charging infrastructure, and there seems to be consensus that the bulk of the charging will happen at depots. So I took here data from ELAT, and I think we'll hear from them later today. And I've seen similar studies also from other sources. So majority depot and hub type charging, but also significant areas along the highways and in rest areas. So that's a specific category where we also need to think about it, maybe in the order of 20% of total charging. Next one, please. Maybe one more point here. So if you look at the capacity that's being added, so these are numbers for the Netherlands, which is, I know the last I saw was around a 20 gigawatt power system. Here we're talking about 3 gigawatts of charging capacity needed. So it gives you an idea what it means in terms of impact on the power system. We're talking about 15%. The charging characteristics of trucks are quite different from cars, because the cars are mainly parked during the day, and that means if you can charge during the day, if you have the charging infrastructure at the office, etc., then you can have smart charging. For the trucks, it will be a little bit different because they're mainly operating during the day. They will be charging during rest hours or at night. Second point is that the charging capacity you need at one spot is much higher for trucks than for cars. You may need megawatt type charging for an individual charging point, and you will have charging stations along the highway, for example, where you may need 10, maybe even 50 megawatts of charging capacity at one spot. And how to connect these is a specific issue that also needs to be taken into account. It has specific planning issues also for the utilities. Next one, please. And so there is interesting cases where these charging stations along the highway have been combined with local renewable power supply. Two examples here, one from California and one in France. It can be done if the situation is right, and that may help to ease also grid congestion in this context. And then the final slide. So we're talking mainly heavy trucks, mainly distances of less than 500 kilometers. And we see continuous battery improvements that could favor this solution for trucks. And the issue of the systems integration then with the energy system deserves special attention, and that's then the focus also of the discussion today. That concludes my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dolf, for this interesting and insightful presentation. So now, without any further delay, let's move right to the first panel. And it is again my pleasure to give the floor to the Minister Claude Thomas. Claude, the floor is yours.
So the first panel is about really trying to identify more the technological aspects of connecting, on one hand, electric trucks, and on the other hand, the charging infrastructure. And I think Dolf has already given some aspects, notably on highway service areas. How do we bring this kind of huge power? But then also, how is this combined? So what we try to identify here with our four speakers is how do we need to coordinate between charging infrastructure and uptake of electric cars? What kinds of incentives? And maybe the central piece is how do we structure this electric charging with the grid and also flexibility? So how do we really anticipate, especially these huge loads? And one aspect which Dolf didn't mention is that you have in Europe, a driver has any way to stop after 4.5 hours during half an hour because of safety regulations. So what will that induce for, in a certain sense, the Pentalateral or the European truck service or the charging infrastructure? So for this first panel, my pleasure to welcome for people. So Hendrik Engdahl, who is the chief engineer from Volvo, so supplying electric trucks. Ricky van Soest, who is one with DHL, so which is one of the hugest, the biggest logistic companies, and already going heavily into electric. We have the pleasure to have Lido Diver, who is leading this business after on e-trucks, also having have a lot of experience in electric buses, which I think is the good way to learn from what happens there over to the trucks. Which is a technology provider, but also a system provider. And we have Johan Peters from ABB, which is ABB being known as one of the major technology providers for let's say, high voltage devices we need. So we set over to Hendrik, or basically, do I have Magnus now, or do I have Hendrik? Or anyway, we have somebody from Volvo. So can you come in?
Yeah,
Hello,
Claude.
Claude.
Sorry to interrupt. I have to tell that Henrik, I mean, your colleague Henrik Engdahl, unfortunately, is in the hospital. We all hope the best for him. I hope it's not serious. And thanks to you, Magnus, to jump in a few hours to take the place of your colleague. So the floor is yours, Magnus.
Yeah, thank you. And you can see my picture on the slide there and in the document. First of all, thanks to the organizers for inviting us. Really interesting. I have a background in the Volvo bus myself, so I've been into this fantastic journey over the last 7 years. Actually, I started in 2014 working with electromobility, and it's exactly like, I think it was you, Guy, or Sandro, who said that now it's time for trucks to enter into this area. Really, this is we are 4 or 5 years behind the buses, but now it's time to take the step. Please share the next slide there. And as I said, here it's only me and not Henrik. I hope good soon recovery for Henrik. I will try to make his slides justice here. Representing the OEMs in general, I think this is a very interesting picture what's happening actually. Partly last year, we introduced our first full electric trucks, focusing city distribution and as you can see in this slide, a refuse truck as well. Now in this year, we have started serial production of these products, taking the first step in order to electrify trucks as well. You can also see some other examples on these trucks from Scania, from Actros, and from DAF. A lot of things are starting to happen on the OEM side with related to trucks. And really good to see that this market takes off in this good way. Next slide. And this will be a wave. As you could see in the previous slide, we are targeting refuse city distribution in this wave. For obvious reasons, you saw it from the presentation, that the technology evolution brings us this development. I don't know if you saw last week, we actually introduced 2 trucks working in the urban construction areas. It's still pilot trucks, but we are taking a concrete mixer as well as a tip loader into customer operation to take the first step into that urban construction. And without saying too much, the regional haul or the regional distribution segment is not far away from our perspective. Then if you look further into the future for long haul, demanding long haul, that will take some additional years. But I think there was also a presentation saying that most of the trucks goes below 500 kilometers. And if we look at figures, we see a lot of trucks actually below 300 kilometers from our vehicle data. So there is a lot of opportunities to start electrifying yet. We should focus on the low-hanging fruits and not the demanding long haul. That is one of our key challenges, I would say, as a business. We have a tendency to look at the most complex scenario, but we need to really focus on the easy way out. And there is a lot of small, short transport assignments around Europe that we could electrify in the next coming years without problems. I think one of, for us, the good thing is that we have pretty good opinions and actually data on where actually truck drive today. And if we go to the next slide, if I was correct, this should be 5 minutes long, something like that, Guy. So I'm trying to do that. That's okay, yeah. We have looked at the driving patterns. So we know this is a representation of actually where trucks stop today. And we see a lot of opportunities for charging actually in our vehicle data today. Based on, this is a blurry slide, but if you dive into it, you can see that there are 90% of the stops are actually between 45 minutes and up to 3 hours. A lot of opportunities to actually do opportunity charging or filling up, as you said. Then I fully agree with Sandor that the majority of charging will be at home in the first phase, but we have possibilities to also top up during the day. And we also see that they have a pretty long overnight stop as well in this area. And this is key to the productivity of truck solution and also the penetration of electric trucks. because we really need to safeguard the productivity of truck operations. That's the key. That is really tough in the truck business today. You really need. So in principle, we can't wait for charging. So we need to have. We need to use the time where the truck is standing still anyhow to do charging. And you know, that is in the night, that is at loading and unloading in different destinations, and it is when drivers are resting according to the driver regulation. So we need to find solutions in order and pinpoint the places where this actually happens today. And as I said in the beginning, we actually have the data. So we are trying to create forums for sharing this data, because it will be focused to put the charging stations in the right place from the beginning, rather focusing on specific regions than a kind of big global, or not global, but big European coverage. So it will be important to find the logistic hotspots where we should put charging. And as I said, we are pushing really hard, and Henrik is pushing really hard for some type of intelligent placement of chargers all over Europe, because that will help us. And from us, I think our OEM colleagues or competitors, they have the same data, and it would be great to see some type of sharing of data, commonality, in order to find the right spots. Yes, that was my last slide, Guy. I hand over to you.
Thank you very much for this, Magnus, for this presentation. Claude, up
yes,
to you.
so next is Ricky van Soest. So from DHL, so I see you are even in your corporate dressing today. Good marketing. So tell us a bit your experience also being a front runner in Rotterdam. And so if we want to move the show, what is important?
Thank you for your time. My name is Ricky van Soest. I'm the Go Green specialist of DHL Express, the Netherlands. At the moment, we have a big pilot in the area of Rotterdam called FlexEV. I will take you to the project. First, let me show you some actuals at the moment. Please, to the next slide. These are our actuals. Starting from the left side, at the moment, 14 cities that we deliver are being delivered by green solutions, electric vehicles, cargo bikes, and other green solutions, also CNG vehicles. At the moment, we have 16 city hubs through all of the Netherlands, and at the moment we are working on expansion in Amsterdam. There's going to be a big city hub from DHL Express, and expanding in The Hague. We have 3 BREEAM facilities at the moment. It's in Den Horen, it's in Zwolle, and it's in Maastricht. Together with a Dutch partner, we are working on building a new cargo bike. And on the right side, you'll see our actuals at the moment. In 1 year, we added 77 green vehicles. Within that year, there were 2 electrical trucks, 50 BD Educatos, and those 2 options are aftermarket solutions. And those are also within the FlexEV project. On the right side below, you see that 34% of our fleet at the moment is green. And please don't forget our cargo bikes in our network. We have 89 cargo bikes at the moment in the Netherlands. So can we please go to the next slide? This is just a small timeline in the implementation, and you'll see what we did in 1 year. Please go to the next slide. FlexEV is a project started roughly 2 years ago together with Rotterdam. We got a subsidy for raising up the electric vehicles within Rotterdam. Within the project, 34 delivery vans and 2 electric trucks are being delivering in Rotterdam and being en route every day. If you look at the timeline, we started last year building a new tour design and looking at our operational setup. We need to inform the employees. We need to inform them about the vehicles that were being delivered, because the vehicles were totally new. We are known with Fiat Ducatos, but not with the BD aftermarket solution e-Ducatos. Also, charging infrastructure at our facility needed to be built. It took almost 2 months, because every day 34 delivery vans and 2 electric trucks are being charged there overnight. In September last year, we started using the trucks, and beginning this year, we started with FlexEV. We had some implementation delay. What we saw within the project is that driving electric and driving an electric vehicle that's coming from an aftermarket solution, it's totally new for us, but it's also totally new for our employees. So our employees, they needed to be trained on how to drive electric. What we saw in the beginning, we started with a few couriers. We didn't knew that we needed the training, so our couriers were driving the electric vehicles. And the reality was that we could drive 100 kilometers with one battery pack, but we needed more. So immediately we searched for a partner. That was a Dutch partner. They told us that they are giving supplying training on the job, and we together with them we made a training, and then we saw a employee was being trained in 1 day, and after that we could manage to have the range to 170 kilometers. So that's a huge difference. So together with them we made the next steps in the implementation, and in July this year, all 50 e-Ducatos that we bought were operational into our network. And in May, we could say that all of the area of Rotterdam we did on a zero emission way. So we're very proud of that. So if you go to the next slides, I will show you some successes and some challenges that came within the project. Starting with the project, we decided to work on work stream approach. So a lot of colleagues of mine were in the project, internal but also external. A success is that we made together with our partner ProDrive. We made a classroom training, but also a training on the job. And now this is being shared with all of the DHL Express and other DHL departments in all of Europe. We created ambassadors because every week new employees will start, and they also need to learn how to drive electric. So we have ambassadors that can train our new people, our own people. We made standards on training for the employees. We extend the experience within the Netherlands, so we are also placing other electric vehicles in Utrecht, Breda, Tilburg, Groningen, and we are sharing our experiences. We made a range overview. Within this range overview, we could see on daily level how much range there's possible to drive, and we made a fast charger overview. What we saw with the fast chargers overview is that there are like less fast chargers in the Netherlands. If you see that it's been growing, but it's all being built on personal transport, and it's hard to find spots where we can drive with our electric buses. So range without training it's a challenge. Driver behavior and range anxiety it's there within the people, so that could be a challenge. Charging en route, that was a challenge, but we are still searching for partners in that, and we are searching for for fast chargers within the city and not beside the highway. We had some malfunctions within the vehicles, and because of the malfunctions, repair and maintenance and the days that they are not operational is about 8. What we saw is that the dealer footprint, because it's an aftermarket solution, we only have 2 dealers within the Netherlands, and we have a national coverage with our network. So it's hard when we have some issues with the vehicle. Yeah, we already have +8 days that it's not operational. So, and the third party, the builder of the vehicle, it's outside of the Netherlands. And we see with COVID, it's hard, because normally we communicate face to face, but now it has to be all by mail or by phone. So that was it.
If you allow me, maybe one additional question to you.
Yes.
How important are zero emission zones in cities? Because you are one logistic company, your competitors continue to drive diesel, maybe a bit cheaper in the beginning. Do we need this kind of level playing field? So is that an important driver? And the second issue is, you mentioned fast chargers and your problem to have access to them. So are you advocating specific fast chargers for the logistics sector? Because you are in competition with personal cars and you don't have time to wait. So how do you see, well, what kind of fast charging infrastructure we need for the logistics sector?
For the fast chargers, it's been a challenge for us because we are within all of the cities, and all of our chargers are, most of our chargers are next to the highway, and we go within our route. We go in the route on the highway, and when we go back to our service center, then we go on the highway again. And when we are in the center, we don't want to go back to the highway to have a charge to charge. And what we see is that within industrial places outside of the inner city, that would be fine for us to charge during the route. But because we see with the technology at the moment, the range is from 110 kilometers till 170 kilometers, and to have a coverage with the whole Netherlands, we need to have more chargers, fast chargers. And for the zero emission zone within the city, I think it's very important because it gives us a goal to work to. Our goal is to have 70% of our first and last mile delivery zero emission by the end of 2025. There still needs to be done a lot. We are at 34% at the moment, but we need all of the partners, also with fast chargers, but also with the vehicles.
You didn't. So zero emission zones, is that something? So is there uneven level of competition between the logistic companies, those who are front runners and you, like you, or isn't that really a problem?
There is some kind of competition, but I think it's I think it will be, for us, we need to work hard to get there. What you see is zero emission zones within the Netherlands. They will be there from 2025 till 2030. The technology and our partners has to do also extra work for us to get it. We are the end users of all of the systems or all of the vehicles. So within our network, and what we see that it's happening within the industry.
Driving, in a certain sense, the political move to have zero emission zones is driving also you as a company to speed up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Then over to Lee. So Lee, you were in the electric bus business. I don't still have you on the screen. I hope that you are there. Lee, are you with us?
Yes, Claude, if I may.
Hello, hi.
Yes, hello, Lee. We have a connection problem in terms of camera, but Lee is there, hopefully, and she will She will intervene by phone, but she has a presentation, so that will
good. So
not
so
pose any problem.
I think what I was struck me in your CV is your huge experience in the e-bus sector, and what do you bring from that sector over to e-trucks, and is that something? So can we learn from e-bus deployment, also depot charging? Is that something which will help us in moving fast on the electric trucks?
Yes, Claude. So hello, good afternoon, and very pleased to be here coming to you this afternoon from Ireland. And to answer your question, yes, the e-bus experience will support e-truck adoption, and it should allow e-truck to adopt faster and also learn lessons that have been garnered from the bus space, particularly with regard to depot charging, but also with regard to en route charging and the types of considerations that have to be taken into account. So there is no doubt that a bus depot and a truck depot, from an electrical infrastructure perspective, are broadly similar, and from a project delivery and then operational controls perspective also look quite similar. And we see that today as we start to develop e-truck projects. We can lean heavily on what we've learned from e-bus experience.
Good, but go ahead and with your presentation.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So the first slide, please. Okay, stop, maybe second slide. Yeah, so what I wanted to just talk about today is to consider the various issues that we have when we want to deploy e-truck infrastructure, and a lot of this leans on the experience that we've had from the bus segment, and that's where the commonality is very clear. So what we need to do is consult extensively with the customer in order to understand what their operations are like, where the vehicles park, how the vehicles are loaded, unloaded, and what the movements look like, particularly in the parking space. Today, the vehicles will return from service, they'll be fueled quite quickly and perhaps put back into service, go to a loading area, and then go to a parking area. So understanding all of that is very important, and taking into account all of those variables so that we can devise a charging system which fits the business, the operational model. And then of course also takes into account the cost of the infrastructure, the cost of the energy, and the complexity of the operation. So that's an upfront consulting and education task, and that's really the same with bus as it is with truck. Obviously there's differences, but they're quite small. Then projects have to be designed and built, and there may be external consultants involved in the design and third-party companies involved in the building, or maybe not, depending on the scope and extent. All of these projects require charging hardware, and understanding how that hardware, again, is optimized for the use case and how much infrastructure you need. It's clearly not tenable from a capacity or an infrastructure cost perspective to have a charger dedicated for each vehicle. But when you start to share equipment, then you need very good control of that equipment, and also predictive tools to control the access and to determine that there's going to be enough capacity and access available when vehicles turn up. And that's something I'll touch on in the second slide in terms of new things that are needed within this space. And that all really sits around then the next part, which is the operational software. So being able to control the devices, being able to provide the right information to people who are making decisions around the vehicle operations. And of course, that the charging equipment, the base hardware, should also be able to integrate with other platforms that already exist today in the transport and logistics segment. And then finally, all of that that's went before has to be enveloped in a service and maintenance program that's appropriate, because no matter what way it goes, if the charger, which is delivering the energy to the vehicle, doesn't work or is offline for some reason, then the vehicle, which is the profit center, which is the significant capital asset, that won't be able to function as intended. So that's a very important part. And again, that the equipment is networked, and that it's a highly integrated system, so that the time from being out of service to being back in service is really short, and the equipment itself needs to be designed to stay in the field and provide a very high degree of uptime. So that's just thinking about what the projects will typically require in terms of end-to-end project solutions. So next slide. So now thinking a little bit more about what doesn't exist today, and particularly what wasn't considered for eBus, or maybe not what wasn't considered is maybe not correct, but certainly what's got to be different about e-truck. So the buses run in fixed routes in the cities typically. The trucks are going to now traverse much greater distances. So they're going to go regionally and indeed internationally across different state borders in Europe. So planning for charging access and charging availability along those routes is something that has to be considered, and that's not a factor today in with heavy vehicle charging so far. So there's a new requirement, and any new requirement is going to drive new business models and also new standardization. So real-time charger availability is something that people who operate these logistic vehicles are going to have to know about, and it could be within their own organization. A company like DHL will need to know what's available at different locations where one of their vehicles may be calling and unloading and unloading, but also in the third-party environment where vehicles can be accessing non-owned equipment. They can be accessing third-party locations. There's going to need to be some way to book, to reserve, to create a sort of a wait list feature at these different kinds of locations, because again, there won't be enough infrastructure to support all of the vehicles on a one-to-one basis. So the actual access is going to have to be planned and managed, because if vehicles turn up, particularly with perishable goods, and they can't access the charging equipment to recharge, that can have a significant impact on operations and ultimately on cost. The overall cost of all of this has also to be considered, because getting access at any cost isn't necessarily going to be accepted, and it isn't necessarily going to be the right thing to do. So the cost of the power and the cost of accessing the locations will also need to be considered, and then the variability around tariffs, which may ultimately play into decisions, and you have to link that back then to drivers' hours, particularly in Europe. So it may be that the decision is made, instead of a driver using the time they have on their digital tachograph to travel for another hour, it actually makes more sense to stop at this location where there is access to charging equipment and where there is power, and then it's at a price that's beneficial to the company. And then when you start to move all of that data around and you're integrating that into critical transport operations, it needs to be secure. So there needs to be appropriate digital trust to manage all of that data, all of that information, to make sure it can be exchanged and secured safely. So it's just a very quick sort of sense or snapshot of how projects are typically developed. And on the first slide, a lot of commonality with transit bus. On the second slide, some new features, new requirements, particularly on information, on data, and on that connection. It's sort of intelligent connection of the ecosystem that doesn't apply to other electric vehicles today, but which will be necessary for electric trucks, and which isn't necessarily there today, even in that heavy trucking space. So that's my thoughts, and hopefully
so maybe
it contributes a little bit.
A question to me. So what you raise is de facto we will need a lot of services who reduce default. So especially in the beginning when the market is not as yet completely mature. So in a certain sense we need intelligence beneath technology. That's a big. That seems to be the main message.
Yes. So if you think of electromobility, I mean, it's the convergence of mobility and energy, and it's underpinned by data. So we can only make efficient, informed decisions if we have access to data and to information. And when we start to now take away the robust, reliable fuel source that the vehicles run on today, which is a legacy fuel source, so it's established, it has a fueling network, people understand how to use it, and in terms of the range and the flexibility of operations. So to replace that fuel source now with a very different fueling scenario means that to give people the confidence and the comfort, and for it to be viable, operationally viable, and ultimately viable for people's business and investment decisions, they need to know, and that decision makers need to know that they have access to that information. So while the picture looks different, the actual output from it should be the same, and it needs to be the same. And this is something I've learned since I started in e-mobility in 2008, is that you don't really get any special favors except in the very, very early stages and in some pilots. So you have to be able to compete alongside the existing vehicles. And that's been the big challenge with passenger cars. It's the challenge with buses. There's no special premium that you're awarded as a company if you have electromobility in your fleet. It must, in terms of performance and efficiency, it must stand alongside the existing technology. So in order for the e-trucks to do that, they're going to need to have this ecosystem to support them, so that the information and to make the right decisions are there.
Thanks a lot for that, Lee. And then over to Johan. Johan from ABB. So look, you are one of the major technology suppliers in electricity. So what is your analysis also when you hear? Do you confirm that we need to be very cautious on where to put the first charging points? And what is not yet clear to me, so what is extremely clear is depot charging. But then where is the nurturing during the day, or if you have to have a fast charger, where will that happen? Do you have some ideas about that?
Yes, and it depends on the use case. But what I would like to start with is basically what we need to get e-truck going. And maybe if we do the next slide. So where we come from the past and where we're going. So yeah. So first of all, thanks for being here on the panel. Also, I would like to mention that the Netherlands. So we are based in the Netherlands, in Delft. And the Netherlands is, I think, on e-mobility really leading. So our headquarters of ABB for e-mobility is in Delft, and since the start, 10 years ago, there were no chargers. Today, we have shipped more than 70,000. Now, what is important to answer your question here? Next slide, please. Okay, there are two important elements for e-mobility and also for e-trucks, and that is, first of all, standardization. And this is just an overview of where we came from. 10 years ago, there was nothing. Then we had CHAdeMO standard. Then we had CCS. We moved up to high power for bus. That was already mentioned. Bus and e-trucks are very, very linked to each other. And next slide. And what we see now is that the focus of today, what I wanted to discuss, is mainly where are we moving the standardization for trucks. Next slide, please. Okay, if you look to the new segment of trucks, so what type of charging do we need? It depends really on the use case, as it was already explained. So there are many different use cases. It depends on the type of vehicles, first of all, small or big, the range you need, and also if you can charge that vehicle en route or, let's say, overnight. Next slide, please. Okay, so this was also already mentioned by Volvo, is that many charging can be done with, let's say, a limited amount of power. So if the range is less than 300 kilometers, then we can use basically the existing technology which is there from cars. So cars developed from 50 kilowatt, let's say 10 years ago to where we are today, even up to levels of 350 kilowatt. But let's say realistically, cars can be charged to 150, 250 kilowatts. There is a standard for that, which is the CCS2, and that standard allows to go up to 920 volts. Now, for this, what we see today is that the first implementations of e-trucks, indeed, they are shorter range, 300 kilometers, as explained by Volvo. These we can perfectly charge with existing infrastructure developed for cars. So the car infrastructure can go up to 920 volts, and with 150, 200, 350 kilowatts, we can charge these trucks fast and reliable. Next slide, please. So this is what we see today as ABB as the first use cases. But there's much more coming. There was a discussion within Sharin, which has also supported CCS2 standard. What would be the future amount of power we need for long-range trucks? And then we're talking about, let's say, 500-600 kilometers. And if you take these big semi-trucks, you calculate the size of the battery, you calculate the size of battery you need, you calculate then how much energy you need, and then if you want to charge that truck in 20 minutes, you can do that calculation, and you come to a number of somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 megawatts. So this was kind of the starting point to say, okay, if you need the 3 megawatts, what type of technology do we need? And there's a new standard upcoming, which is called megawatt charging, and this is based on, let's say, truck charging, on the car charging, CCS2, but with higher power, higher voltage, and higher current. So the MCS connector is capable of doing 1,000 volts up to 3,000 amps, so theoretically 3 megawatts, and optionally drivetrains can maybe later also go to higher voltage, so we can go close to 4 megawatts. So what ABB is doing today, we have, of course, our standard range, which is CCS2, which can do typically 350 kilowatts or 450 kilowatts, and we're developing now the next high power standard, MCS, where we hope to have first prototypes by, let's say, end of next year, which will be 1 megawatt. Next slide, please. Now, this standard is, and that's very important also for if we want to avoid what we had in the past with cars, where it's CHAdeMO and CCS2 and AC and Tesla supercharging standard. So the good news is there is a new upcoming standard. It's not yet fully there, but the plug is already defined. It's called MCS. And here you see this connector. This connector is capable to handle 3 megawatts. So the whole idea is that you can do this by hand. Also, the inlet of the trucks will be defined. How is this done? Basically by cooling both the inlet as well as the cable as well as the connector. And depending on which cooling mode you can have 3 different power levels. So if you have no cooling, you can go up to 350 amps. If that is 1,000 volts or 900 volts, okay, you can go close to 300, 350 kilowatts. But this can go up to 3,000 amps by cooling both the connector as well as the inlet. What we see, and Tesla Semi is pushing that a little bit, so we believe that Tesla probably will be the first coming with this long-range trucks, probably somewhere next year. We believe that the first, let's say, long-range semi-trucks, they will be charged with somewhere in the range of 1 megawatt. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is huge amount of power. Second point is, what does that mean for the grid? If you would do nothing and we need all of this power, then the first idea is, yeah, I need to increase transformers, medium voltage. But there is another way. Next slide, please. So if you would load manage these systems, this was already discussed. If you load manage these systems, then it's possible to schedule the charging to stay below a certain, let's say, grid capacity. And in this way, it would be possible to have these massive charging sites with very little grid adaptation. Next slide, please. So this was here an example of an e-bus. So what we do here, and that's really the key to make this happen, power goes up to megawatt levels, is that you make sure all your charging systems are, let's say, intelligently managed from a power level point of view. Next slide, please. And in this way, you can avoid, let's say, costly upgrades. So just to show you, this was a situation, I would say, a few years ago. You had maybe 2 50 kilowatt chargers on a certain site. So that was kind of the golden standard, I would say, 5 years ago. And what was done was simply hooking up 2 50 kilowatt chargers to somewhere a 400 volt connection. And that was it. So there was no intelligence between these chargers. And then what you had to do, you had to have a 100 kilowatt grid connection. But there is a better way of doing that. Next slide, please. So if we now look to where we are going, and again, this is a two-step approach. The first step is that with existing technology, CCS2 in Europe, we can handle, let's say, the existing first upcoming trucks up to 300 kilometer. In the future, you will have massive, but really massive charging sites, or that can be at the docking site where you unload and load. So we talk typically these semi-trucks that will be charged, every single one, with 1 to 2 megawatts of power. Now, if you add that up, that can be 50 to 100 trucks together. Then we're talking megawatts and megawatts of power. By intelligently managing these charging, and also you will have separate substations for these charging sites. And the issue is not really the high voltage grid. So if you bring a high voltage line to such a charging site, this is not a big issue to bring 20 megawatt to a site. Of course, you need a separate substation. The trick will be that within this grid capacity you provide, that you manage this in a very smart way, and that's why you need software. That was already mentioned by the previous speaker. Also, you need intelligent software to manage the charging power, also in relationship with what is available from the grid, and also with alternative energy sources. Next slide, and I think this is more or less my storyline. So yeah, so the whole thing is basically make sure your intelligent control your charging, yeah, also in combination with fleet management. That will be the trick to avoid costly grid upgrades. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a bit of a time problem. We are half an hour late, and so I think this was fantastic input, but we will not have time to do now questions and answers. So we can do this also a bit through the chat room. But thanks for the 4 of you. My greetings to Hendrik, and I hope that he will recover, and we will immediately move over to the next panel in order to catch up some time. Sorry for that, but I think we have also to respect our conference timing, and then immediately over to what is our next panel. We have three speakers. Somebody from Mark Frank from DPD Switzerland. Then we go over the ocean. Great that Cristiano, that you have been able to join us to give us a bit of a flavor what is California doing. And then of course in Europe, when you want really to move things fast, you need European Commission. So thank you, Axel, for joining us from the European Commission, because leadership from the European Commission is needed. So the first roundtable was more about the technological aspects. Now we will more focus on policy issues, financial issues, and I immediately hand over to Mark Frank. So why is Switzerland one of the front runners, and what had, so is it due to the fact that you have this transport charges, this tax policy, which are a bit more progressive than in other European countries. So why is Switzerland the front runner?
All right, thanks for having me today and asking these questions. I hope I can answer that to you and the audience. Yeah, I have two roles today. I'm a representative, of course, of DPD Switzerland, and I will present you our pilot project with the EHDV. But also I have to have the head of the group, and I will start with that one quite shortly. Maybe the next slide. Yeah, that's the brands of DPD Group, and you might have seen these cars on one of the roads in your area, hopefully. Next slide, please. Today, DPD Group works at 23 countries in Europe. We are number 2 player. We already heard about the number 1 player in Europe. Now it's time for number 2 player. Yeah, the numbers are okay. I think let's go for the next slide. Yeah, I think this is for us in the industry, the courier express and parcel market. We talk about a lot about last mile delivery, and a couple of weeks ago, the head offices in Paris, they announced our green strategy, which is by 2025 reduce CO2 per parcel. We will deliver with low emission vans in 225 cities by 2025. Maybe you see on the next slide in which cities this will happen. We will serve almost 20% of the European population with low emission vehicles. And we will also invest 200 million euros. But again, this mainly focus on the last mile deliveries, and we already heard about the challenges on the last mile and the vans in that area when it comes to range, to charging points, and so on. But yeah, maybe we move to the next slide. There's more than that, than the last mile, and this was the point where I started. Switzerland, very small country in the DPD Group network, also in Europe, and we have a network of 11 sites, and all the sites are connected with so-called line hauls, which are served by those heavy trucks. And only in Switzerland, this is only the domestic market, Switzerland, we run 1.3 million kilometers in line haul every year. And this represents almost 1/3 of our CO2 emissions in our network. And on group level, as the distance is increasing, especially cross-border, I think this portion goes up to 1/2. So we spend a lot of money and a lot of time, and we have to adapt our operations to be emission-free or have zero emission on last mile. And the focus on the line haul is a bit more difficult, as we heard already, due to the network and the cars. Nevertheless, I think we have a pilot in Switzerland, and we can see on the next slide. We will have our first electric line haul in Switzerland operating in January. It will be delivered in December. 100% green electricity. It will come with 680 kilowatt hours electric battery. We expect a range of 700 kilometers. That's much more than we heard earlier. The business case is based on 80,000 kilometers a year. Not a lot. The truck can do much more. With that truck, we will save, based on the milings I've mentioned, 70 tons in CO2 per year. And this was very important for us. This technology more or less already exists. It's not a total new truck like other competitors present. It's a common technology. The truck is coming from Volvo. So we have after sales, we have reliability. And all the electricity, the batteries, this is done by a Swiss-based company called Designwork, and they're working a couple of years in that area. Started to build garbage trucks and so on. And with our 680 kilowatt hours, we expect by December 2020, we expect to have the largest battery on the truck on the road operating. So I've been to the factory yesterday. The truck is currently built. Volvo already did the job. Now we need to put the electrics inside. This is not a marketing paper. This really will exist. And maybe on the next slide, I think that's interesting. Why will it exist? And for us, there are three pillars which make it possible. First of all, it's the freight weight thing. We heard the battery are heavy. With our battery, we expect 4.5 tons with the 680 kilowatt hours. But for us in the parcel industry, it's not an issue because our trucks are full, but they're never heavy. We are not on the limits of the legal limits, let's put it that way. So we can handle this battery. It's not an issue for us. Second pillar, due to our depot infrastructure, and I said in Switzerland we have 11 sites, we are not reliable on any public charging stations. And to build a business case, and I mean, will be an operational truck, so we need to have it working every night, more or less. Huh? We can't rely on any public charging point and hope it's free. So with our depot infrastructure, we are more or less autonomous on that. So we will have 1 or 2 sites equipped with a 150 kilowatt charging station for the beginning. And the next pillar, that's the financial support. And you mentioned that into the introduction. Switzerland is a bit more progressive on that. Currently, the road toll for a truck like ours is roughly 70 cents per kilometer. Each kilometer driven, doesn't matter if it's on the highway or not, each kilometer. And for the moment, for electric truck, there is no road toll. So we will save 70 cents per kilometer. This is the main driver for the return on invest, for sure. And the other one is the energy costs. Currently, electricity is cheaper than diesel, and yeah, let's see what the future brings. But that's also the risk in the whole story. I don't know exactly how long government and legal rule will support the reduced road tolls. This is for the moment, and in Switzerland it's not said how long it will continue. And I think, as far as I know, also Europe and the EU is currently discussing about the Eurovignette and the tax advantages for zero emission vehicles. Yeah, next slide. I think it's the main picture. You asked earlier if that's a competitive advantage, maybe, but I think at the end of the day, and that's also for the Green Deal, it's our we need to work on that to continue in the future and have the right to operate. Yeah, thanks a lot.
But Mark, if I just, so why did you choose electric and not hydrogen? Because Switzerland has also this pilot project on hydrogen. This is very well advocated in these days. So I would have expected you would go hydrogen. So what is the thinking behind?
I was at the opening ceremony of the hydrogen truck and so on with Hyundai. Today there's no truck with hydrogen could handle our swap bodies. That's a very operational issue. It's not there. At the moment, Switzerland has, I think, 1 or 2 public gas stations for hydrogen. The other will come in the near future. And for me, it was like, okay, I'd like to act. I'd like to act on this 1/3, 1/2 CO2 emissions in our network, and I don't want to wait another 5 years for the perfect solution to come. And I think this already works. And as I said, we will start to operate in January 2021 and not 2023.
Another issue, you will do depot charging, and so will it be overnight charging, or which can be medium fast, or will you go for fast chargers, or a combination of both?
It's 150 kilowatt. It's not in the area we had earlier with the megawatt charging. It's 150 kilowatt fast charging. Usually our line hauls run through the night, so we will charge them in the early morning hours. then we could use it for pickups with customers, and then we could charge it again and then use it overnight. One of the reasons why the battery is that large, even though we don't need it in full capacity, is that battery life is extending dramatically if you don't use the whole capacity. Mm-hmm. The battery gets less stressed, to say it that way. So we expect to also operate the truck for at least 8 years with that kind of mileage we planned here.
Thanks a lot. Then we do a huge jump over the ocean. Cristiano, are you with us? And look, we have now heard Switzerland, and afterwards we will have European Commission. I was always thrilled as the member of European Parliament to compare us in Europe with California, because that was worldwide the only competitor we really had. So challenge us. So what are you doing over there, and what do we need to do to speed this up?
Yes, absolutely, and thanks for the invitation to be here. Like in this, really important to present the experience in California. They have recently adopted what they call the Advanced Clean Trucks Rule, or ACT for short, and they really establish requirements for zero-emission trucks sold in California. So today is the most ambitious and only like regulation to advance zero-emission trucks like in the world. But a little bit about about CalSTART, and our role in the ACT. So like CalSTART is a nonprofit environmental organization. We focus on advancing clean technologies. It's like initially, like 30 years ago, we focused strictly in California. To date, we have more of a global outreach as well. But we engage very closely with California. We informed California's investment strategies, and we also manage their incentive programs for zero-emission technologies for commercial vehicles. And the important thing here is that for California's regulation to be successful, it is really important that other markets also advance towards zero-emission commercial vehicles. So that's why this type of discussion is so critical. And it was exactly with this in mind that we created our Drive to Zero initiative. So next slide, please. Which really aims, so it's an international initiative aiming to accelerate the growth of zero-emission commercial vehicles. So there's two goals in mind, so that by 2025, we want zero-emission technologies to be commercially viable and cost effective on a total cost of ownership basis in what we call key applications, right? Which I'll explain next. And in key markets, so that by 2040, we really achieve market dominance with technologies in terms of sales of new vehicles. And it is important, and the reason why I mentioned this is that it is important that the signals that California is sending are also aligned with what other markets are doing, because it is a global market. And if we really need to reach economies of scale like a lot faster, we need different regions around the world investing in the same type of applications and implementing the same type of ecosystems, right? The same policies, the regulations, the incentives. And so the ACT rule is at the heart of the Drive to Zero strategy, which aims to align the deployment and the supportive policies and incentives so that we can achieve cost viability by 2025. So if we go to the next slide, it is important to understand that the ACT rule follows a very well-established strategy where zero-emission technologies are coming in waves, and they actually take hold first in transit buses, because of their predictable routes and the ability to charge overnight at depots. So this is wave number one, like in the chart. And then because of technology transfer, all of the investments in battery technology and powertrains and components can then be transferred to other applications, such as shuttle vans, urban delivery vans in wave number 2, and then medium duty regional delivery in wave number 3. And all of that can be accomplished in the short and medium term. And then from there, the investments can be leveraged to larger and long distance applications, right? So in a nutshell, so the ACT rule, follows a very sensible commercialization strategy because they have more aggressive targets for these earlier waves, right? So if you can go to the next slide. Also important that the ACT rule was not adopted in a vacuum, right? It includes a lot of information about like the availability of models. So in this charts, we can see the number of available models for zero emission commercial vehicles. So these charts are for North America, for US and Canada. We also have the equivalent numbers in Europe as well. And the trends that we see in North America are, similar to the trends that we see in Europe. So if we compare the chart on the right, this is the number of total models, and we can see that from the end of last year to the end of this year, like the number of models, it increased by 80%, right? And then these numbers are actually going to double by 2023. So, and if we move to the chart on the right, we can see the same numbers but segmented in the different types of applications. So with the purple wedge, which is for transit buses, really having the most available number of models, which is consistent with that strategy, the commercialization strategy that I showed earlier. But then by 2020, it is the green wedge, so the medium duty trucks that are going to boast the most number of models available. So that really, talks about how this succession in waves, can actually be seen in the real world by model availability. And even if you look into the second blue wedge, those are the heavy duty trucks. And they really show the most consistent growth in terms of the models up to 2023, right? So an important thing is, now here we're talking about number of models, right? We're not exactly talking about the actual number of trucks like out there. So the market is still very nascent. And so that's why it is really important for governments to send like this strong signal. So we can, if we go to the next slide, please. So as I was saying, so the California ACT rule like establishes specific targets for sales of zero emission trucks taking effect in 2024, requiring that at least 40% of all tractor trailers sold in California be zero emissions by 2035. So the rule is tougher for delivery trucks and vans. So they're the class 4 to 8, the green wedge, the green line, because technology is more ready, right? So it's like consistent with the data that we showed before. So zero emission sales requirements, they need to be 75% by 2035. So it's also important to say that following the ACT adoption, 15 other US states and the District of Columbia have agreed to work together to accelerate this market for zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicles, like with the goal of 30% of zero emission sales by 2030 and 100% of zero emission trucks, new zero emission trucks by 2050. So while these other states haven't committed to the same regulatory targets that California did, they really committed to working together, like to accelerate this market. So if we move to my next slide and last one, it's really important to see, like, so for the ACT rule, it is a very good step, but it's not the only one. It's really important that leading regions adopt, what we call the ecosystems of complementary and aligned regulation, incentives, and investments, right? So the ACT does the first one. So those are the sale requirements, like for manufacturers. Like you also need to put like the same kind of requirements on the fleets, so that the fleets are also required to purchase those vehicles, and obviously so that we achieve cost parity, to get incentives for the vehicle upfront costs, and obviously in the previous panels, we're talking a lot about infrastructure, exactly the infrastructure investments, to power all of these vehicles, and then finally, it's really important to have the local level policies. Those are the zero emission zones, the access restrictions, like road pricing. So it's really important that we have this ecosystem of incentives. And so while California and these other US states have aligned in their goals, it's really important that other nations in leading markets, in particular in Europe and China, also align to send even stronger signals so that this becomes like a global movement, right? I mean, the truck manufacturing sector is global, like in nature. So, and it's exactly this global alignment that is at the heart of our Drive to Zero initiative, right? Which is also like a campaign of the Clean Energy Ministerial. So within the Penta region, the Netherlands and Germany, are already part of this Drive to Zero campaign. I would love for the other countries to, and industry partners to join. So if you move to the next slide, so I would really like to reach out and and invite like all of you who would like to participate in our network. Please do reach out to me so that we can really align these policies. And again, thank you very much for the invitation to be here.
Thanks a lot. So that's really inspiring, and maybe it brings some stress to our next speaker, to Axel. So what we hear from Cristiano is basically that we should have specific targets for certain categories of trucks. So in Europe today, we have this be 30% better in average for new. That is, so the California says that's not optimal. So we will have anyway a revision of that legislation. So shouldn't we be a bit more inspired than by California on that? And the other message was from the first speaker on this issue. Switzerland has already adopted a lower toll for electric trucks. So shouldn't that be really a key focus also when we revise the Eurovignette? Axel, up to you.
Axel, we cannot hear you. Can you start again? No, we cannot hear you. Is your micro button green? Oh, okay, so we have an issue here.
Good, but maybe whilst you are trying to solve this,
okay.
If there is, so we have one question from the chat room, which is going back also a bit to technology. Do local battery, could they accommodate the peak shaving of the system? Is that something which you consider in California, or I don't know if ABB is still with us, or ChargePoint? If so having on-site batteries beneath the fast chargers, is that something which would ease the integration of mega chargers?
ABB is still here, so.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so yes, we believe that local storage for peak shaving makes sense, but only for peak shaving, not to push energy back into the grid. However, if we look to truck charging, big truck depots, where we have maybe 20 or 50 trucks, which are running continuously, then maybe it's less of a solution, because you have a continuous load which you need to provide, and you will not be able to charge the battery. So peak shaving, absolutely, for certain cases. For trucks, we still have to see.
Okay, thanks a lot, Johan. Did we solve the technical problem with Axel? Not yet.
Don't think so. Can you hear me now?
Oh yes, perfect.
Very good. So we saved it.
thumbs press on Commission with the two first question, but not the additional one with the microphone.
No.
So sorry for that.
Okay, so once more, thanks again for the opportunity to participate to your conference on behalf of DG Move, also on behalf of my hierarchy. I think there are a number of points under discussion. And first of all, let me say, I think when I listen to what Mr. Franchancha has sort of presented for California, I can see that we are discussing more or less along similar pathways up to 2050, because you could see from the a climate target plan and the underpinning analysis that the Commission just published a few weeks ago, that we are looking in terms of 2050 at a very similar ambition levels. And for us, it's of course now to follow up on this sort of overall ambition and come forward with a set of initiatives as they are announced for next year. Maybe because I've been asked, so we have both regulatory instrument and financial support instruments, and I think the discussion has also pointed at both, and I think both of them are really necessary. So first of all, I think we are absolutely d'accord and with what everybody has said. We see a very rapid development in the market. Yes, the market is very nascent for the moment. We have a few hundred or maybe a bit more than 1,000 trucks in operation, but it is moving very fast. We see that all manufacturers have electric trucks in the program. We see fuel cell hydrogen truck investment really going up. So we are expecting serious production of battery and fuel cell electric trucks for long distance, also around 2025, 2026, or even earlier. So in that sense, so going back to what Mr. Gielan has presented, maybe in the beginning, indeed, we already have today the possibility to use zero-emission powertrains for a number of use cases. But then the question is, and that maybe brings me to first discussing sort of financial support instruments. Building the truck is one thing and bringing them into the market is the other issue. And that's not so trivial in a market that is highly competitive with low margins and a lot of family-owned small and medium-sized enterprises and the current impacts of the economic crisis. So public support is needed to vehicle infrastructure deployment. And also, and I was very happy for Mark Frank to raise that and for you to ask about it, in terms of the overall sort of cost competitiveness of these technologies. Indeed, we need to have instruments to better reflect the actual cost of using the different technologies. And you know that our sort of proposal for a revision of the Eurovignette is still hanging in the Council. So we, of course, would like to sort of revise that directive to have the ability to better reflect sort of the benefits and also sort of the additional cost and risks that the early adopters of that technology take in terms of the differentiation in the toll system. In terms of the incentives that also Mr. Franchancha spoke up, I think we are at a very unique situation in Europe now. Yes, we have COVID, but we also have the unique sort of firing power of particularly the Recovery and Resilience Facility now, but then also of the InvestEU program under the upcoming multi-annual financial framework. And I think from us, I mean, the Commission was very clear when we issued the guidance to member states. It is our sort of expectation that we make wise use of this money for the recovery and that we use it in particular to build sort of that economies, that infrastructure that supports sort of the transition to ultimately zero emission mobility. I think it's too early to say, what member states are planning because we are sort of in preliminary discussions, but as you are Pentalateral, and I think you have lots of discussions around this, I think it's a clear sort of plea from our side that we sort of make use of this financing possibility to come back to what was discussed earlier, particularly in terms of infrastructure for zero emission trucks, which can be heavy investments. How are we going to do it and not look at this only from the member state perspective, but indeed from the cross-border perspective, because we want to have cross-border connectivity, and the TEN-T network is, of course, sort of the basis for that. I think speaking more from my other side of the perspective, and that is sort of the policy and regulation, because you know that we are in charge of the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, and we're preparing for the revision of that directive next year, together with the revision of the TEN-T policy guidelines. So we will have a big sort of infrastructure policy package up that will determine much of the future transport infrastructure. it is important that we kind of find an intelligent sort of policy design, as it was hinted to by the speaker from Volvo, because on the one hand, it is a nascent market. We still have lots of open questions about also technical specifications for infrastructure, where should they be located. And on the other hand, if we want to help that market quickly grow, we need to have a long-term policy framework that sets a clear sort of market direction. So from our side, we are very open sort of to use the next months to discuss with basically all of you what you expect in terms of that policy framework to come up for infrastructure. And just let me say that it's not only a recovery and resilience facility, but also the InvestEU, which can provide sort of a tremendous support to this fleet renewal, because we have the sustainable infrastructure window under that instrument. It is specifically designed to support private investments in transport infrastructure and fleet renewal. You know, it is implemented by partners which have an experience and interest in supporting SMEs, the European Investment Fund. So that is very important that we make good use of these opportunities. And the same for the Connecting Europe facility, where from our side, we're supporting transport infrastructure investment. We are making sort of now an effort to front load a lot of the future financing, in particular to roll out sort of infrastructure for zero emission vehicles, particularly on the heavy duty side. But then of course, we also need to have the pipeline for these projects and for this funding. So I think in that sense, good coordination among yourself and the broader European perspective is very important. And that, of course, will then lead to the infrastructure policy packages that we have in 2021 for alternative fuels infrastructure, where we are aiming to clearly differentiate the needs for the light and for the heavy duty vehicles, because we haven't done that so far in our policy framework. So we will have to sort of, it's our wish to define both better requirements for the infrastructure rollout, but then also coming back to what previous speakers have been saying, and I fully agree, it will be our at least the same kind of policy priority to ensure that we have an intelligent use of the infrastructure, that we define the remaining interoperability needs, that we define intelligent infrastructure use services, that consumer information, which is also important for truck operators, is updated, and that we have really this intelligent system of making use of the infrastructure. So in that sense, I think I stop here. So I think we'll have a sort of very good opportunity to kind of continue this discussion and feed into our thinking, and then continue post summer 2021. So with the challenge that we'll have to sort of square the circle of having sort of still a nascent market. And also, let's not forget, I mean, we have that discussion with your region. If we would take the same discussion into the southeast of Europe, we would have a different discussion. So with this, the need to square sort of how do we get a balanced rollout with sort of adequate minimum infrastructure, but also without over sort of confronting the market. So as the colleague from Volvo was saying, so what is the intelligent approach? And that is what we are looking very heavily into right now. And we, of course, we would welcome sort of the possibility to get the feedback from US member states, but then also from the broader sort of industry.
Thanks a lot, Axel. I have one question back to California, if Cristiano is still with us. So on the long haul, on your picture, you had a fuel cell truck. When I read Elon Musk, he says that fuel cells is a non-starter. Well, what do you have? So where do you stand in this analysis? If trucks will go hydrogen or trucks will go electric? Is there already? Do we feel where the innovation is faster?
Yeah, I think I mean, the one thing, you know, especially from a policy making perspective, is that, you know, we should be technology neutral, right? I think it's up to the industry, you know, to determine, you know, what is the best pathway to achieve specific results. So you know, what we really care is that the technologies are zero emissions, right? You know, for what we see today, I mean, we see developments in both of them. Obviously, at the urban level, it is battery technology that is really charging ahead, you know, where we're seeing, you know, commercialization and volumes as well. But, you know, a lot of the experts, they, you know, they question Elon Musk's rationale, like in terms of even the physics, like behind it. But so far, I mean, I would say that we just don't have enough information, you know, really, and we don't even need to choose a winner, like for this. I think that there could be like different competing technologies in the marketplace.
No, but yes and no, because look, in Luxembourg we have the biggest volume sales in one service station, which is Air de Berchem, and in a certain sense, as the energy minister of that country, I need to know what will happen in 5 to 8 years, because it's completely different if I have to bring hydrogen to this service station or if I have to bring electricity. Good, but so we will have to watch the market, and maybe there will be a mix. Good. With that, again, so we have basically, we are now only 15 to 20 minutes behind, but luckily we had foreseen a break, so that break will of course break. so no break, and we will immediately move over to our third panel. But please stay with us if you have an opportunity to stay with us. And the third panel will be exactly about, hey guys, don't move too fast, because the whole electricity system will break up. So that's a bit of what I get when I speak to folks in Luxembourg or around. So our next panel is more the experts from keeping the lights on, and I'm pleased to have Laurent Schmidt with me from NSOE. We have Onov Caron from ELAT, who did a study recently for Netherlands. We have another going back over the ocean with Ed Pike. So great that we have a second Californian with us today. And then of course we have also Hamburg. I understand, Bastian, Hamburg being one of the logistic hotspots. So it's clear that if there is stress on the electricity grid, it will be in Hamburg. But first, the boss of all this electron grid is in a certain sense Laurent. So Laurent, what is your best guess?
Okay, so first of all, can you hear me, Claude?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So good afternoon to everyone, and thank you, Claude, for the invitation to this very interesting debate. So I must say it's a debate which is also very new to NSOE. So NSOE is the Association of Transmission Grid Operators in Europe. And the way we have approached so far the debate is trying to model what's going to be the adoption of various technology in the context of our grid planning, which we refer as 10-year network development plan. And here, this year, for the first time, we tried to do a grid planning based on a top-down exercise on how could we be net zero in 2050 across all sectors. So we had to project basically the impact of renewable integration into the power system on one side, but also look at gain related to power to heat, power to gas, hydrogen, and of course the power to transportation is also a very important area of study for the moment. And we had in our last scenario exercise, which has just been completed 6 months ago, the following assumption that basically it is a no-brainer that electrical vehicles are going to develop large scale for passenger car, reaching around 100 million for 2030, 2040. And we had pretty good assumption on the smart charging and the rather limited impact on peaks. But I must say that we had to have very conservative assumption when it was coming to heavy trucks. And so far, we mostly made the assumption that the electric trucks would fall into the category of complexity in deep electrification. In other words, mostly going towards hydrogen. But of course, that's just the starting of a debate. And we actually are listening and following from an innovation point of view all these developments, and we will make sure we adjust our assumption in the coming TYNDP so that we can properly plan the needed high-speed charging infrastructure according to what we hear through these debates. So for the moment, it's still a big question mark, and we look forward listening to the forum like today and trying to evolve in our analysis.
Thanks a lot, Laurent. Then immediately over to probably what is one of the most detailed studies done recently in this area, which was done by ELAT in Netherlands. So we have the pleasure to have Onov Caron, the director of ELAT, with us. So what's your best guess? And I think now it's more than a best guess because you have done a detailed study.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for having me on the webinar and the invite. Yeah, well, it is of course because it'll be happening in the future. Still a best guess, but it's better than no guess. So ELAD is a knowledge and development center for electric mobility in Holland. We were founded 10 years ago by the Dutch grid companies, and they're still funding ELAD. And of course, our focus has changed towards logistics, heavy duty transport, and even ships and stuff like that, because we see electrification all around. So please, next slide. Yeah, so what we see here is what we have discussed with all the stakeholders in the field, and we, of course, one of the first questions were, where are the heavy duty trucks going to charge? And the depots are, of course, as was mentioned by many people already, the main charging location for trucks, some 90% we think. This can be at the location of the transporter himself or locations of the shippers where they have contracts with. Some of these can also be shared with other transporters. This can be financially interesting, maybe part of the business case for smaller transport companies. Some 10% will be en route, a French word, en route high power charging during the rest for some 10% of energy demand, but it is extremely important for longer distances and wider employability of electric trucks. So far today, we could not find any company yet or any investor yet that is willing to seriously invest into public high power charging network, a high power charging network for electric trucks. Existing CPOs for normal cars have plans ready, but rather invest in chargers for personal vehicles at the moment. So I think we see here a classic chicken and egg problem. We've done a few scenarios. You see them here, well, next slide, please. I only have 7 minutes, don't I? So what we see here is a rapid growth as soon as the TCO becomes attractive. And well, that can be anywhere between 2022 or 2026. Trucks will use smart charging for depot charging, but still will result in the need of larger grid connections for many of our clients. In many cases, the first trucks will fit nicely, but depending on the local situation, for more trucks, higher level grid reinforcements are needed. You can see here on the slide to the right, it is in Dutch. I must apologize for that, but we try to give an insight into if you have 4 trucks, will that be a difficulty with regard to the infrastructure? More than 35 trucks or more than 200 trucks, and then you can see that, for instance, when you have in Holland, you have more than 35 trucks, and there is no substation available. It would mean that we would have to find space. Of course, it would take, with everything involved, maybe 2.5 to 3 years to get it fixed, and it will cost a lot of money. So that having said, then time, of course, becomes an issue. Extra substations are not built within a week or months. Many take years, as I said. In crowded areas, it might even take years to find a good location, especially for the larger substations. And worst case, this could cause huge financial stress for transport companies that need to go electric, because the TCO, as was said, can't wait for years. So that leads us to the next slide with three key insights. Yes, thank you. One of the things we have to do is invest in the future. So don't just wait for companies to ask for it. Grid companies must think ahead. But legislation or regulation often is a problem there. And then you will be, of course, too late if many follow. And a proactive approach is needed. And in the Dutch situation, we have the legislation that is not helping there. So then secondly, a practical advice for local governments. In Holland, we have two programs. It's called the Regional Electricity Strategy and the National Agenda for Charging Infrastructure. These are programs that try to how do you say that? Get an insight into the demand and the supply of capacity, and that is something the municipalities themselves, the regional organizations, and will have to do. That is one thing where they can think ahead and help us as DSOs to know what the future will bring. And of course, thirdly, a strategic approach is needed for public fast charging network for trucks. Otherwise, it will be a problem, and that's probably that will be in combination with other means of transport. That means, that is to say, other means of areas where you can have supply of wind or solar energy, a battery capacity, and also a resting place for heavy-duty trucks. So that is in a very short overview what we've experienced in Holland, and of course the situation is everywhere different. At the moment in Holland we have some 134,000 heavy-duty trucks, and only 0.1% of that is at the moment electrified. One of the main drivers in Holland will be one of the main drivers will be the how do you say that, the policy of municipalities, of the 30 to 40 major municipalities, to become a zero emission zone in by 2025. So then diesel heavy duty trucks will no longer be able to get into the cities. So electrification there is a key that will lead to charging hubs and stuff like that. And of course, as in other countries as well, subsidies are also part of the drivers. As with other functionalities, as DSOs, we can build everything. That's not the issue. The issue is we can't do it at the same time and at the same moment. So that means that we have to be part of the plans, part of the initiatives that are taken. By now, the infrastructure is part of mobility, and we should act conformally. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So basically your main message is we need this kind of big charging infrastructure, but it is the chicken and egg problem, and the market alone will probably not solve it, which is a bit of a problem because in Europe we have today a market alone approach to charging stations. So
yes.
we'll have
yes.
to see
yes.
if that is really still adequate. Huh? Good.
Yeah.
Over then to Uros. You are basically leading the innovations, the strategic innovation with NSOE. So Laurent has said it's early days, but on the other hand, I think the grid operators really need to understand what's happening. And for example, in Luxembourg, we are now doing probably 100 fast or nearly 100 fast charging stations for cars, 350 kilowatt. We will connect things to the medium voltage grid. But then the question is, of course, if you go for this mega, is medium voltage still appropriate, or so? So how do we? Is there already some first thinking with NSOE on that?
Sure. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, perfect. So actually, I have to correct you. I'm the vice chair of Research and Development Innovation Committee at NSOE, but I'm a strategic innovation department at ELIS, which is a TSO. And I will also try to show you one of the more progressive thinking way on this subject in particular. So I will start with the electricity system as such, because we have to be aware that this system is always a moving target. The prices are not fixed in this system, and they're even moving on an hourly level during the day. And this can be very clearly also transferred into the end consumer prices. So today it is not always the case, but in business consumption, you can have very dynamic tariffs where actually you can bring electricity price down to the end consumer. And this must be very clearly observed in this connection between the transport and electricity sector, because the oil price throughout the roads is fixed. It's not changing in the way as electricity. At the same time, we have to be aware that renewable energy sources are available at certain hours of the day. And when they're not available, the price gets very expensive. And this is a particularity which has to be taken into account. So to summarize this first part is that the planning of heavy-duty vehicle traffic and the generation flow and looking at both sides actually makes sense, because if we observe the both sides, we can see some very interesting patterns in the background. So when we think about the charging points, and now moving into this charging point field, we should not be surprised in the future that we will see the growing trend of these powerful nodes, which will be allowing hundreds of heavy-duty vehicles to be charged at one location, at one point simultaneously. We will have buses, we will have lorries, we might have these small vehicles. Also, we should think about all professional vehicles, which will have this need to squeeze the time of charging to shorten periods. Also, don't forget about autonomous driving vehicles, because these cars also have this flexibility for the location. And we should also not be surprised if we see that these locations of charging might be needing to get closer to the high voltage grid. As you mentioned, Claude, medium voltage grid is very suitable for smart charging in different ways. But if we want that we get a better price of electricity into the vehicles, if we want to reduce also the network charges, if we want to increase the powers, we actually have to move into the vicinity, or we should get closer to the high voltage grid. So looking in some sort of proximity between the traffic systems and the high voltage grids for the future, creating new nodes, maybe existing nodes, gasoline stations might become obsolete. That's still a question, but we have to be aware of this possibility. And getting into the new nodes, which will allow all these flexibilities and of course support all the needs of the heavy duty traffic. This is a scenario, this is an important way of the future. But once we get there, and now I'm just finishing with the other statement I have to make today, we should not forget that when we define these new mega charging points, we should not look only into the support of electric charging. A very important element here will be the support of better mobility, of better traffic, because the charging points and the traffic, they have this interrelation. So intermodality, if we have buses, lorries on these locations, we can actually help providing better service for the traffic through these new locations. So these new locations are not necessary just to support the charging. They should also help relieving the traffic congestions. They should help doing better on both sides. And this optimization is actually what we see as this cross-sector coupling between the transport and the power. And this is something what a progressive thinking network operators actually have on the table today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So Ed, now you have got some of the analysis in Europe, and I'm looking forward to what's your analysis in California. And look, the sheer fact that you are with California Public Utilities Commission is already a reference, because I think I had personal also contact with some of your predecessors, and so it's great to have you. And so you in California who try to speed up zero emission, so how do you anticipate the stress on the charging infrastructure? And
well, thanks. Okay, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today. How's the audio? Okay, excellent. Well, as you know, and you've already heard from Cristiano about California's very ambitious climate goals, the governor has issued an executive order that will ban sales of new passenger vehicles that are not zero emissions, and also by 2045, medium heavy duty vehicles as well. So, and I know that many of the participants and presenters here are also from countries with and regions with very aggressive electrification goals. So it's really exciting to learn from you all and share where we're headed on this. And of course, so this is going to require very intense electrification, and it's going to require vehicle grid integration, along with developing our renewables goals. And in my opinion, I don't have a modeling or research study to back this up, but it's my opinion that really it's no longer going to be possible to consider these different goals in isolation and try to coordinate on the margin, but instead we have to put all these things together, because we can't achieve these things in silos anymore. You know, as we try to decarbonize, you know, virtually all of the economy, we really have to put these things all together as we scale. And California is taking a leadership role, and there's also, I think, a lot for us to learn from all of you. So, you know, while I'll be presenting some lessons that we've learned, I also recognize we're in the early days, and it takes a village to mature this young technology and markets to maturity, in this case, a global village. So a couple of things I want to mention. First of all is a vehicle to grid integration working group, which produced a final report in June, and we had excellent participation from a wide range of stakeholders who generously donated their time and their talent. And that report is available in the handout section of this webinar. And it contains a lot of research that went into developing potential use cases. And like everything related to VGI, it seems there's still a lot more work to be done, but identified a lot related to one-way charging that are able to provide value now, and many more related to power exported back to a grid or building that could be viable in the future. I think there might have been a very few that are considered viable in a practical sense now.
So are truck batteries easier to fit in this vehicle to grid and playing a role in storage than car batteries, or is just because of the scale of their volume?
Yeah, so I think it's even more essential that we have vehicle to grid integration for medium and heavy duty vehicles. I mean, we've already heard from plenty of speakers about how these concentrated deployments will have huge impacts on the grid, and how it's necessary to manage charging to avoid or to reduce the amount of grid upgrades that are needed. And, you know, perhaps still local upgrades will be needed, but maybe less or so, and maybe less also upstream types of impacts from managing the load on site. And I think as we go to 100% electrification, we also will need the ability to put power back onto the grid, both for the distribution impacts, to mitigate that, because not every vehicle is going to be managed. Some people will be driving their car and it's not something they're going to think about. And we're also trying to electrify buildings. And so I think the ability to put power back on the grid is going to become increasingly important. And I think for medium and heavy duty vehicles with large concentrated loads and sophisticated grid, fleet operators who are very familiar with operating costs, I think that's a really prime opportunity to avoid impacts on the distribution system, as well as things like system impacts, where you have peak loads in the middle of the day, or you have events, and you may need to shuffle charging around to benefit the grid. I think there's other opportunities like timing charging for uptake of renewable solar energy, grid services like frequency regulation. So I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities for medium and heavy duty fleets to provide vehicle to grid integration services, while of course recognizing that their primary job is providing transportation. So we need to figure out how to optimize, how to make sure these vehicles can achieve their primary duty cycle, and figure out the other types of services that they can potentially provide through vehicle to grid integration. And I don't think that the answer is clear right now. I know there's been some research on that topic, but that's something we really will need to figure out. And we can do it incrementally. We can start by making sure that a new fleet facility, you mitigate the amount of grid infrastructure upgrades needed just due to one site being constructed. But then you need to step beyond that in terms of, okay, now that it's in the ground, how does it potentially benefit the grid, or provide more sophisticated services based on dynamic time of use rates that benefit the host site. And there's going to be an optimization challenge along with developing policies and technologies to support all of these different types of applications and use cases. And the California Public Utilities Commission is required to issue VGI strategies by the end of this year by existing legislation. And so we of course want to be as ambitious as possible, but I think while there's some things that are clear steps that we can take now, and we are in many cases, this is really a starting point, and we still have a lot to learn, both from our own work and I think also from our partners globally, on how do we really move forward at scale.
Thanks a lot, Ed. And then our last speaker for this this part is Bastian Faher from Hamburg is like Rotterdam, Antwerp. That's one of the big logistic hotspots. So how do you anticipate this kind of wave, which will probably happen or should happen soon?
Hello to everybody. Audio is okay? Perfect. First, thanks for the invitation to this panel. And I want to give you some practice experiences from Hamburg, not especially about trucks, but about electric buses for our public transport. And first, I want to give you an idea about the company Stromnetz Hamburg. As a distribution system operator, we are responsible for nearly 30,000 kilometers of lines and cables, several substations and transformer stations, and we have more than 1.1 million customers in our distribution grid, with 3 voltage levels from high voltage down to low voltage. And we expect an increasing of the peak load in our grid up to 40% in the next 20 years. And this increase causes mainly by electric vehicles, heat pumps, and of course the transport sector. Now to the experience with our electric vehicles, especially our heavy electric vehicles. The city of Hamburg decided in 2016 to electrify the complete fleet of our buses for public transport in Hamburg. And actually we have 1,500 buses in the city, and they use 10 fleet depots in the city for maintenance and so on. And these 10 depots have to be fitted with loading infrastructure, and they has to be connected to our distribution grid. The buses will load with high power DC chargers with 150 kV, and all these 10 depots has to be finalized and connected to the grid to 2025. In the first idea of the bus fleet operators, this connection should be very powerful to guarantee the loading process for each bus. So we had to connect the most of the depots to our high voltage grid because of the power could not be provided via medium voltage or low voltage grids, of course. So we started many discussions with the fleet operators to think about the operational processes, the loading times for each bus, the number of kilometers each bus is driving during the operations. And the result was a reduction of the calculated peak load to nearly 50% for each of the 10 depots. We optimized the mentioned parameters and assumed a dynamic load management system to get this result. And now only one depot is connected to the high voltage grid, the others to the medium voltage grid. And the fleet operators save millions of euros with this solution, and we save years for planning, building, and getting permissions. It is a factor from 1 to 10 in the costs from medium voltage to high voltage, and a factor from 1 to 5 in the number of years for planning, building, and so on. So it's much more easier to connect this infrastructure in the medium voltage level than in the high voltage level. And we also implemented this connection with peak load management for our ride-sharing operator Moja in Hamburg. Moja operates several depots for their 500 small buses in Hamburg. And they also use high power chargers with 150 kV. And the depots are also connected to our medium voltage grid. And actually, we discussed similar cases with our transport and logistics sector to electrify their heavy duty fleets as well as their light truck fleets. And from my side, the impact of this infrastructure to our distribution grid is dramatic. We have to transport the energy to the depots, and we have to construct the grid connection with all influences like permissions, planning, building, and so on. So our vision is to optimize the grid connection of depots to reduce costs of these influences. And my plea to every fleet operator planning to electrify his fleet is to talk to his grid operator as soon as possible, so both parties can optimize the operation and the grid connection together and save lots of money and time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a clear message. We need intelligence from the very beginning on, and we need to talk between those who want to have depot charging and the
Claude, ton micro. Ton micro. Ton micro. Tu dois rebrancher ton micro, Claude. Tu es on mute. Voilà.
Okay.
C'est bon.
So now it's good. So I think we need intelligence into the system. And I have one question from the audience back to NSOE. So so it's local, but it's also national and it's transnational. So in your this kind of NSOE 10-year planning, how do you think? How do you want to integrate, or how will you integrate this whole challenge of e-trucks and these kind of big nodes? Probably it's a question to you, Uros.
Micro, s'il vous plaît.
Yeah.
Merci.
Sorry. Yes, so as already mentioned by Laurent Schmidt, the current 10-year network development plan was more into hydrogen, transportation of heavy-duty vehicles. What I showed in my exposition was what we could expect if the things turn around more into electrification. So if these scenarios will happen, we should try to bring these nodes, these high power nodes, into vicinity of existing networks, because otherwise we will face these huge hurdles of having problems with expansion of grids. We will have a lot of problems, and we will not be able to subtract all the renewable energy into this transportation, which is so important goal for all of us. Yeah? So if we really talk between each other, if the charging point operators, but also the fleet operators actually, which will be so important here, get these intersection points. We're talking about serious cross-sector coupling here. This is not a joke, of course. We need new simulators actually to bring these two together, because also the buses, also all the important chargers will have to be optimized in this sense. And yes, we can avoid a lot of investment with proper planning, but depot charging and highway charging and other locations, they all have to be taken into account, and the best solution will prevail.
Good, and I think that brings the discussion probably back to what Olaf Caron was saying in the beginning. Just a free market will not solve this. So we will need some strategic planning where we bring the depots, the big nodes, the grid, and also the renewables. So this kind of variable time management, all that has to be integrated. So probably the message from this conference is, hey, grid operators, you have to really take this up now. And looking forward to continue to work with you. So sorry we could of course deepen this for probably for hours. Thanks for your input. We will move immediately then to our last panel, which is a bit more of policy making, and I'm happy to have Tiziana Frongia from Transport and Environment with us. Hi, Tiziana. We have also Mariette from Netherlands. Hi, Mariette. I think it was 1 year ago that we were sitting together in Luxembourg on our first Pentalateral Electric conference. Pleased to have you with us. And then, of course, Arthur, who is one of the key drivers of European Commission thinking, and one of those who helps us to bring Europe to zero carbon. So I don't know if you have listened to all of what we said, but or to some. But I think the question for this panel is nation, so and optimizing, like in Hamburg, the local issue. But I think this we are here also in a cross. We have to think across the borders, because the lorries move across the borders. And so maybe Tiziana, if you could start with, well, what do you, from Transport and Environment, what do you expect, or what are the things you want now policymakers to take up also, let's say in the Pentalateral Forum or in a European forums? Tiziana.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I had a few slides which actually would reply to your question and are a bit summarizing what was some of the messages that we heard today from other speakers, from Irina, from DG Move, and from Volvo. So how to get e-trucks on the road, what is missing, what is how can we get this started? And in particular, I mean, in Europe, in the Pentalateral region in particular, I will have some figures for that. So if we can go to the next slide, as Axel has already highlighted, that now we have a golden opportunity for investing, since we have quite a big pot of money where national authorities, where member states can use, and actually they are now designing the national recovery plans, and it's really important that they focus on helping the sector to transition to zero. So we need to focus on zero emission technologies. We need to help the SMEs, the transport operators, to purchase these electric vehicles, which are currently more expensive than the diesel ones for the moment. And we need to help also OEMs, like manufacturers, to transition state production. And also, of course, we need to invest in infrastructure. And if we go to the next slide, focusing on infrastructure, where do we start? This was already said by Volvo. We have a low-hanging fruit, and which is regional and urban delivery, happening half of the truck activity in the EU happening in the range of 300 kilometers, and we have the technology for this. So all European manufacturers are now selling electric trucks with this range, and cost parity is on reach in the early 2020s for these operations. And what we know is that these operations are really focused around urban areas. And what we've seen from already all the other panels, that we need 80% is going to be depot charging overnight, but we need also some public charging to unlock the operation and make sure that transport can happen, and that the driver has the safety that he can drive that extra mile if needed. And there is also some destination charging needed, so at the logistics hubs, for example, and this can be considered as a shared infrastructure because not only one company will use it. So where should this infrastructure be deployed first? And if we can go to the next slide. What we have analyzed at TNE is looking at the traffic flows in the EU, and there are really clearly, this is the map for the Pentalateral region in particular. We have identified hotspot of traffic activity, truck traffic activity. And we are talking about urban nodes because this traffic activity is focusing in large urban areas, and we have 53 urban nodes for the Pentalateral region. If we electrify these urban nodes, we are already electrifying most of the operations at urban regional delivery. In particular, for example, an interesting fact, the area of the Benelux and West Germany is the area in Europe with the highest truck traffic. So if we electrify those urban nodes, we are really tackling an hotspot of truck traffic in Europe. So it will be really important to invest in electrifying the urban nodes. This is a low investment and high reward strategy. If we go to the next slide, in terms of how many truck chargers we need. So we are talking in general for a scenario which is compliant with the climate neutrality ambition, so by 2050, and we would need, for this, we call it a road to zero scenario, we would need to have that every third truck sold in the EU in 2030 has to be electric, and 1 in 10 is electric in 2025 already. What does it mean in terms of charging infrastructure for the public and the destination chargers? You can see it, for example, for Germany, we would need around 6,000 chargers, and for the Benelux region is a bit more than 2,000. This is for public and destination chargers. If we look only at public, we would need 2 chargers at least per urban node by 2025, and 10 chargers per urban node by 2030. This is what we recommend as the strategy for infrastructure, allowing for cross-border traffic to happen in a smooth and seamless way for electric trucks. So it's going to be very important that with the revision of the Alternative Fuel Directive, the Commission really champions the urban nodes electrification, and that member states cooperate with the region when developing the infrastructure at these urban nodes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiziana. So Mariette, when you listen to Tiziana, do you share this analysis, and that's also a bit what you are doing now in Netherlands, and what would you be your best advice for what can we do together in the Pentalateral region?
Your microphone, please. Oh, it's not working. It's not functioning.
Okay, now it's working.
Yes.
I was muted by you. Okay. So thank you, Claude, for inviting me and talking about it. In the Netherlands, we have the Dutch Climate Agreement, and there we have a wide range of measures which we have taken into account for the implementation of the zero-emission heavy duty. And that's a balanced approach between regulation and incentives. And if you look, for example, on the regulation part, it's key measures, like Onuf already said, on the installation of zero-emission zones for commercial vehicles in the large municipalities. And I think that's very key for introducing also the zero-emission heavy duty. And our zones are starting by 2025, so that's already very early. Then we also have, for long distance trucks, we have a target of 30% CO2 efficiency improvement by 2030. And to kickstart the market, we have different financial instruments varying from pilot project to purchase subsidies. And of course, the charging, we were talking a lot about it. It's very important. In the Netherlands, we have a Dutch roadmap for the implementation of the charging infrastructure. And it's a kind of public-private partnership where we are looking with all partners, including also the grid operators, to see for the city logistics and the hinterland connections and the continental freight, which might be the best possible way. And there's also dedicated projects for clean energy hubs for heavy duty. So I think those kind of examples. Maybe you asked also what would be my advice to speed it up, and I think there are 4 elements which I would like to mention. And first of all, show ambition and work together with stakeholders. That is to provide clear long-term goal and a roadmap, like we have done for the zero-emission zones and also for the charging infrastructure. And I think then you have to look at your policy measures to see which hurdles you can overcome in different phases of the market development. And so you also have specific approaches for different subsegments in the logistics. The second one is make sure to develop common standards on an international level, especially for truck types that travel across the border. Tiziana already told us, if we are looking in the Benelux part, there we are working together and we should. And we work also together with parties like Onuf Koron from ELAT to see how we can develop policies that addresses all the challenges where he was talking about. Then the third one is collaborate along main freight corridors to enable network coverage of the infrastructure that make use of the common development standards, and probably also make use of data like Volvo told in an earlier panel. And they have a lot of data collected and we can use for charging. The fourth element which I would like to mention is support experiments to accelerate market introduction. We heard some good examples from Switzerland, but also in the Netherlands, our biggest retailer Ahold is doing experiments and gaining experience with the first generation of the electric trucks in their logistic operations. And so that's, I think, the most important things I wanted to say, but maybe because I'm before Arthur, I can maybe also say something which are our wishes for the next phase and also for the green, how do we call it, the new plan, which is the Smart and Sustainable Mobility, which is coming in December. And related to heavy duty, I would like to have 3 wishes. The first of all is strong regulation for heavy duty vehicles. I think that's really necessary if we want to make some steps. The second one is funds in research, development and innovation for the industry, like in Horizon Europe. And the third is investments in cross-border energy infrastructure for freight, as foreseen in the CEF. And I think all the panels today have already mentioned the necessity of more regional cooperation between energy infrastructure and transport. So let me conclude by that, Claude.
Thank you very much, and it's great to see how you are driving the show in Netherlands, and we can probably learn all around Netherlands on that. Arthur, you will be the last panelist. So you got already the targeted question from Mariette and also from Tiziana. So yeah, so you know that you have to deliver in December. And the other question is, of course, Europe is always about Commission coming up with regulation, but this regulation is ambitious if EU Commission has front runners like Pentalateral. So to be fair, so we put some pressure on you, but what could we as Pentalateral deliver in order to help the European agenda?
Thank you very much, and it feels a little bit like becoming St. Nicholas here today with all the wishes that are being presented and that we are supposed to deliver in December right on time, despite the fact that we will still have COVID. No, without any joke, I think in terms of the thinking, we of course in the Commission go along the same line. We have just asked member state to ramp up the European target to -55% by the year 2030, and that will require action from all sectors, and that also includes stronger action from the transport sector. But there, I think we are confident because we see the new technologies evolving, developing, and starting to be rolled out. And that is not only true for the segment of cars and vans, which also, I think, play an important role in regional delivery, but it's also for the delivery trucks, particularly the smaller ones. And I would probably do the same what Tiziana did, looking at the next 10 years in two phases. One is up to 25 and one is after 25. Because until 25, what we can do is help with assistance and support in terms of new programs. And a lot of that, of course, at the moment will hinge on the recovery. The recovery program is a huge investment into the European Union. And President von der Leyen has been very clear that this should be done into the 7 lighthouse projects, as she called it. And one of those is the charging infrastructure for vehicles, whether it is trucks or whether it is cars. That is definitely in the cards. And we are looking forward receiving good ideas from member states, because this is not something which we can just put on top as a conditionality onto member states, but we need to see the demand from the side of member states. So the corridors Mariette was talking about, and I think also the clusters Tiziana was showing in her maps, I would think these are ideal candidates for these types of programs. So now they need to be developed, and if they are developed by groups of member states, we think that is even better, because that really would show the European value added when it comes to next generation EU. And the same goes for the investment into research over the coming years. We have gone quite far in terms of developing the programs that will be rolled out as of the beginning of next year. And the focus is very clearly on clean HDVs, so zero emission HDVs. It's electricity directly used, or it is also hydrogen that is being talked about. So these are technologies that will be supported when it comes to HDVs in the coming years. And I think the car manufacturers or the truck manufacturers are interested in seeing support there. And I think these are the things we can really do in the short term. When it comes to the longer term, then that is where legislation will kick in. And Tiziana mentioned the AFID. Even if we do the proposal by mid next year in June, it will still take some time until this is going to be implemented. So to see big results out of that already in the year 25 is probably premature. But by the year 2030, definitely the AFID can start biting, as can the CO2 standards that we are going to set for the trucks. And the timetable is already there. In the year 2022, we promised we will particularly come with the segments that are not yet covered. It's particularly the ones that have the smaller tons, so it's the regional delivery trucks. And we hope, of course, that we can be very ambitious there in setting CO2 standards for that. And I believe there is probably also a case to be made for looking at the heavy duty vehicles, so the heavy trucks, whether we can also improve the standards there. I think we should not leave that untouched. We should also look into this. But then finally, there's also the wider question of the entire, some people now call these things ecosystems. And that also has to do with the whole battery infrastructure. And that is the production on one hand, but that's also the recycling that we need to get right if we really want to go to the mass deployment of these new technologies when it comes to electrification, because they will be, it's the only way that you can maintain that technology into the future. So it's important to make sure that you link this up with the circular economy in the coming years. And I believe these I think would be the main things from the side of the Commission we should be thinking of. There is an issue kind of which always comes in, is the fuels and the fuel legislation. We will look at that also during the course of next year. I think the big question out there is still in how far is this relevant for heavy duty vehicles? For large parts, I presume that electrification is going to be the route. The big question mark still is, what do you do with long distance trucks, also with long distance trucks in very sparsely populated areas? But these are kind of niche issues, I would think, looking forward. But in terms of the fuels, as I said, the electricity will come directly or it will come via hydrogen, because there's also quite some interest on the side of the manufacturers in that.
Arthur, you mentioned the batteries, but so we have been waiting for months for this battery directive. So is it finally coming? So I heard September, then I heard October, now I heard 11th of November. So is Commission finally coming up with that legislation?
Yes, it will come up. It is not a simple issue. I think that is what many people have been seeing. It's not that straightforward. So in order to have it well prepared, it takes a few more weeks in order to be ready to be proposed. But it's an essential element for the electrification of the economy. Because without that, we all know that in terms of material efficiency, it's just not going to work in the longer term. You can work on this in small numbers, but as soon as you get into large numbers, you need to have the battery recycling.
No, and I think for all the advocates of electromobility, it's clear we need this EU legislation, and it must be a strict EU legislation which enforces not only recycling but also sourcing from sustainable mining. Because in the public debate, I think this child work in cobalt, that is still the big story, which is also hampering the broader consensus in society on electromobility. So we are now, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you see it, at the end of our conference. I don't know, Mariette, Tiziana, if you have something really important to a last message, I could give you a minute or so, and then we move over to Jan Lema from the Benelux Secretariat, and to Dolph also for very short comments. And then I think we should go to close this interesting conference. So Mariette, Tiziana, something you want to add? No? Okay, good. Then is Jan Molema, are you up and running?
Yes.
Good.
Can you hear me?
Good turn.
Okay, fantastic to be on your show, if I can call it like this. It's really been inspiring. Maybe I congratulate you first on inspiring the people around you. That means the people from TNE, of course, who have been co-hosting this, people from IRENA, who have been also technically hosting this in a fantastic way, and including also the people from our own Benelux Secretariat that have heard many inputs to work on in the future in working groups at the Benelux level, at the pentalateral level, and most probably also in close cooperation with the European colleagues. Now, maybe in a few steps, on the Benelux level, I heard you mentioning a couple of times environmental zones. Those are discussed intensively right now. Actually, we have found a way to connect technically the data sharing between environmental zones, meaning we can see what kind of cars go from one city to another and which can enter those environmental zones. That will help in facilitating what you are working on. We have a fantastic way of, meanwhile my daughter runs in, sorry. We have a fantastic working group on transport since 2015 that aims for e-mobility, starting with personal passengers, but now entering also heavy vehicles. Freight weight, I heard. Freight weight is an issue. Within the Benelux context, we are right now trying to come to an agreement that allows for 2 tons more for zero-emission trucks. So 2 tons upon the 44 tons that have already been agreed on the European level. So we can create this zone of innovation. Can I then go to the penta level? The pentalateral level is a very specific area in the sense that I have noticed that all over the world, and if I look at the participation list here, it's really a global known area for innovation. It's an area where we can actually work and show the rest of our neighboring countries. We can inspire each other to arrive at a level of integration in e-energy cooperation that has shown its results in the past. The results on electricity cooperation, results on renewable cooperation, we are shown right now in many areas, but that is a way of cooperation, of regional cooperation, and that in the end is what your topic of your conference today is about, the regional cooperation that can show the way to Europe on how to go further and how to make substantial steps. We have done this in market integration. We have done this for reducing and getting together prices. Now is probably the time to also really look into e-mobility for trucks. And then, if I can quote maybe one of the speakers today, the money is there. So what are we waiting for? Can we work together in a Benelux context? Can we work together in a pentalateral context to come up with smart plans, to use the ideas of this conference today to make plans that convince the European Union to invest in this very, well, let's say, transport intensive area to reach zero emission transport. I think we have all that in ideas, and we have all that in inspiration on the table today. Maybe I can then end by saying that if we use some of the speakers today's inspiration, maybe we should get some Californian drive and be the inspirers of the regions around us. If you have a good idea, you've seen California had good ideas and they inspired the rest of the states, maybe, likely, I would say, the Penta countries, the Benelux countries can do the same using what we have discussed today. Thank you very much.
So what I get is, so we are the California, what California is to US, we are to Europe. And I think one important issue in Benelux and Pentalateral will be, we have different working groups. For example, we have those people doing the Pentalateral grid planning. And I think now is the moment that the grid planning people have to meet the mobility people, and we have to cities to get together to and then define concrete pilots, which at Benelux and even better Pentalateral and bring this to the European level. So, and be aware, the 3 prime ministers of Benelux have reinforced that, what was it, 10 days ago when they were together. So you have a mandate, you have a mission by the 3 Benelux prime ministers to work on this end. So thanks a lot also for helping us to organize this. So back to Dolf. So Dolf, give us a bit, what is your 2-3 points? Did you learn something today, or was it boring? What's your basically summing up this?
Well, first of all, big thanks to the audience. I see that half of the participants are still in the meeting, so that's, I think, good at this late moment. Thanks then also, of course, to Minister Claude Turmes for chairing this whole afternoon, because that's a big part of your busy agenda. And thanks very much to the speakers, because I think we heard a number of important things. Now, what I took away, first of all, when we started this, we were a little bit worried that there would be a strong pushback. Oh, this is, why are you so much focusing on electric? But what we heard from a number of speakers is that the market of freight is very segmented. There are a number of segments where it's already clear that it's going in the direction of electric. We see now even in the more difficult segments, some move in this direction. So you may still see different solutions emerging. And I understand that is an investment problem, because what infrastructure do you build then? Recharging or hydrogen? But there seems also to be a role for electric in all these markets. Then we see that there is a need for cooperation at the decision-making level, at also the policy level, because of course a lot of this transport is cross-boundary. We also need to make sure that the standards are universal and the technologies that are being developed are universal. And it's not only in a European context, but for example, it would be very beneficial if California and Europe had solutions that were compatible. We heard that there is a lot of policy development ongoing, also at the European level, be it about the stimulus plan, be it about the infrastructure, the sustainable mobility plan we heard, and we heard about the battery directive. We need to make sure that all of that now, what happens over the next coming months, is indeed compatible with what we see happening in terms of technology development. Digitalization was especially mentioned as a critical enabler. So it's not only hardware, also the software becomes very important, and of course the data is important, and there could be a better sharing of data that would enable better planning of this transition. In terms of the infrastructure, there is a clear trend towards also chargers with higher capacity. And if we go in that direction, then we will need longer term planning horizons also for the utilities to allow how to integrate that. Now, there was a call more from the utility side that we need to plan these charging stations where it's useful for the grid. There was a call from the consumer side, from the fleet owner side, that said we need to plan the charging stations where it's useful for us. So it seems that is an area where there is more dialogue needed. Maybe that would be something for the Pentalateral Forum. We heard that targets in this are very important, and we need specific targets for specific truck types. What else? Yeah, I think these are more or less the main points that of course, there were mentioning of corridors and early clusters that may be of interest in the coming years as we develop this solution. And we heard a number of interesting policy suggestions, such as the idea of allowing electric trucks some more weight to enable them to, especially in the early years, to take on. So these are the main things I noted.
Thanks a lot, Dolf. I think the biggest thanks for me goes for all those who we don't see on the screen. There's this fantastic team of coming from different offices, from Marina, from Benelux, from my office, from TND, who has prepared this conference over weeks and months. And so it's really great. I think you are the real champions to have enabled this. Look, I think this was really for me very, very inspiring. When I started to speak 2-3 years ago about electric trucks, basically sometimes I needed to, or like a conference like today is a bit like showing me that I'm not completely crazy. And I think I feel that the technology development, because of the innovation of batteries, I think it's much faster than everything which happens on hydrogen. So I think that we did a good job in really highlighting that trucks could go much faster to electrics than a lot of people think. And to repeat what I said in the beginning, the truck business is not about emotions or do I like a diesel car or an electric car. It's a business where you have very let's say tough competition. So the day where electric trucks of 150 kilometers are cheaper than a diesel truck, the change is much more rapid, I think, than it will be on the car market. And I think we need to better understand also by talking to the big actors in the logistics sector on where do they see this break even. Is it only policy making in the beginning, or is it also because electric is so much more efficient than hydrogen and so much more efficient than diesel, which will make this kind of break even point not so far away, and then things will go fast, and then we will need to have the infrastructure. Good. Guy, is there anything else between us and hopefully a fresh beer or something like that?
Thank you, Claude. No, I mean, you see, the discussion was so dense that I already left my jacket. So now, what I can say is that that is all for us from us today. We did our best, and we do hope that you have enjoyed this webinar. All of you. We used to be almost 300 people attending, and as Dolf mentioned, we are still more than 100 people attending until the end. So we do hope that you have learned something and get inspired by the intervention of all these panelists, and thank you all for accepting the participation. The idea was to put a little stone in the path to a sustainable and zero carbon transport. And as Claude would certainly agree, stone by stone, like he did for 19 years in the Parliament, we will build up the road to sustainable transport. So once again, thank you for joining us, and see you well in one of our next sessions of this kind of webinar that we will organize, well, most probably in 1 year on the 22nd of October 2021, and hopefully it will be a physical one this time. So thank you very much. Thank you, Claude, for taking so much time. I think that your interactivity with the panelists was also one of the key of success of this webinar. Thank you all very much, and have a good night. Thank you.